أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. الحمد لله والحمد حقه كما يستحقه حمدا كثيرا. وأعوذ به من شر نفسي إن النفس لأمارة بالسوء إلا ما رحم ربي. والصلاة والسلام على خير خلقه أجمعين نبينا وحبيب قلوبنا وشفيع ذنوبنا أبي القاسم محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المطهرين. قال الله العظيم في كتابه الكريم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الذين آتيناهم الكتاب أولئك بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يتلونه حق تلاوته. آمنا بالله. صدق الله العلي العظيم. For the purification of the souls and the enlightenment of the hearts, and for the hastening of the reappearance of the awaited Savior, Ajjalallahu Ta'ala Farajahu Sharif, enlighten your souls and the atmosphere with the recitation of Salawat ala Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. Respected elders, brothers and sisters, Salamun alaykum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It is the most read and followed book in the history of mankind. Billions of human beings throughout the history have associated themselves with it. It is indeed considered by more than 2 billion human beings today as the constitution of righteousness, well-being, happiness, success in this world and the hereafter. The Holy Quran is indeed the belief of the Muslims that it is the word of God which brings forth success in all realms of one's existence. The Holy Quran is considered to be the book of guidance, the book by which many Muslims will hold tightly and will respect at all costs. You'll find that Muslims will be offended when the Quran is indeed somehow subjected to abuse or disrespected. And hence the Quran occupies a very central position in the lives of many people across the world. Indeed, this is a reflection of the emphasis that the Quran itself places on itself. Whereas you find the word Quran is mentioned 50 times in the Holy Book. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in numerous verses in the Holy Quran highlights its position, highlights its significance, highlights its importance. For example, لو أنزلنا هذا القرآن على جبل لرأيته خاشعا متصدعا من خشية الله. Allah says, if this Quran was to be revealed on a mountain, you would see it crumble due to the fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You would see the mountain crumble indeed. Likewise, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَنُنَزِّلُ مِنَ الْقُرْآنِ مَا هُوَ شِفَاءٌ وَرَحْمَةٌ لِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ. This Quran is in no way or shape or form like any other book in that it brings both spiritual as well as physical healing. Hence you find that the holy beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam beautifully mentions that the superiority of the Quran over all other kalam is like the superiority of Allah over His creation. As you recognize just by this the importance of this particular holy book. The Ahl al-Bayt, no doubt, as you and I, each and every one of us know very well, paid most attention to the Holy Quran. Our holy fourth Imam, Imam Zayn al-Abidin al-Sajjad, salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi, is narrated to have said that if whoever's in the east or whoever's in the west is perished and nobody remains alive, I would not feel lonely because I have the Holy Quran. Indeed, that is a highlight and reflects the relationship that the glorious family of the Prophet had with the Book of Allah. Amir al-Mu'mineen wa Imam al-Muttaqeen Ali ibn Abi Talib salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi indeed encourages you and I to take this holy book very seriously in our lives. It is narrated in a beautiful narration that he says, "Ta'allamu kitab Allah." Make sure that you take a primary objective in your lives, and that is to educate yourselves about the book of Allah. فَإِنَّهُ أَحْسَنُ الْحَدِيثِ. It is no doubt the best of speech. وَأَبْلَغُ الْمَوْعِظَةِ. It is the best of counsel and advice. وَتَفَقَّهُ فِيهِ فَإِنَّهُ رَبِيعُ الْقُلُوبِ. Seek its knowledge because it will what? It will strengthen your hearts. It will bring forth some kind of a spring in your heart. And then he goes on to say, وَاسْتَشْفِعُوا بِنُورِهِ فَإِنَّهُ شِفَاءٌ لِمَا فِي الصُّدُورِ. Seek enlightenment from its light because it brings healing for that which exists on the chests. وَأَحْسِنُوا تِلَاوَتَهِ فَإِنَّهُ أَحْسَنُ الْقَصَصِ. And recite it in the best possible way because the narratives and the stories you'll find in the Quran, the Imam says, are indeed the best. And that's why you and I today, when we reflect on our day-to-day modern world, we find if you go, for example, on YouTube, you look for the most viewed clip. Or if you go to TripAdvisor, you want to find the best reviews for a particular hotel or an airline. Or for example, if you're wanting to buy a particular gadget, you look for the best reviews. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says categorically, the Holy Quran is the best in terms of what you and I can obtain as far as inspiration is concerned. Allahu nazzala ahsan al-hadith. It is the best communication. It is the best way of motivation and inspiration. نحن نقص عليك أحسن القصص. Nothing comes close to the Quran as far as what? Its eloquence, its power, its ability to indeed move the human being and to motivate them in their lives. And hence you find that when it comes to this holy book, there is a need for us in this holy month to understand it more than, of course, any other time. It's an opportunity to re-examine our association with the Holy Quran. The question that I would like to ask myself first, and all mu'mineen, my respected brothers and sisters, is this. When you and I pick up the Holy Quran, what kind of feeling goes through our mind? What kind of image immediately is portrayed before us? Sometimes when we pick up the holy book, some of us fear that I may make a mistake in the recitation, that I may not be able to understand what is it that I'm reciting. Sometimes individuals on a higher caliber of spirituality, when they pick up the book of Allah, they might fear that they're not acting upon the teachings of the holy book. And there are different ways and approaches that when it comes to individuals approaching and establishing a relationship with the Holy Quran undertake. Yet of course, this relationship with the Holy Book has a number of stages. The first is to recognize its significance as far as our well-being. Because how many times we've read the verse in Surah Taha, Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala in chapter 20 says, Taha ma anzalna alayka al-Qur'an litashqa. Many times the Mufassirin and perhaps even the translations of the Quran, when you recite this particular verse and you read the translation, it says, Taha, we have not revealed the Quran for you so that you go through hardship. Question. What happened? Narrations say that the Prophet of Islam used to stay the night in salah and recitation of the Quran to the extent that his feet would swell up, according to some narrations. Some narrations would say that he would constantly wake up in the enjoyment of the recitation of the Quran as well as Salatul Layl and other forms of worship. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would say to him, I did not reveal the Quran so that you put this excessive pain and suffering over yourself. مَا أَنزَلْنَا عَلَيْكَ الْقُرْآنَ لِتَشْقَى. That's according to many Mufassirin. Yet there is, and the beauty of Quran is such that there is an ability to look even further and to understand the verse in even more depth. And that is what? And that is to understand that in Arabic there are two words. There is sa'ada and there is shaqa. Sa'ada means happiness. Shaqa means despair, despondency. Yes? The Quran comes forward and says, O Holy Prophet, and of course this Taha is addressed to the Prophet but it's applicable to all human beings. O human beings, the Quran is not a book that makes you fearful or should make you despair. It's a constitution of happiness. ما أنزلنا عليك القرآن لتشقى. It is not that the Quran is there so that you feel some kind of anguish or despair. Rather, it is one that brings you joy and happiness in both this world and the hereafter. No doubt that the first level when it comes to establishing the relationship is to look at the importance of the recitation of the Quran. That the Quran is mentioned or is named as such in order for us to recite it, because it comes from the word qara, means the one that is often recited. And indeed the Quran itself emphasizes the need for us to recite it. فَقْرَأُوا مَا تَيَسَّرَ مِنَ الْقُرْآنِ. Recite whatever you are able to from the Holy Quran. The Holy Beloved Prophet Muhammad Al-Mustafa sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam comes forward and says, نَوِّرُوا بُيُوتَكُمْ بِتِلَاوَةِ الْقُرْآنِ. That illuminate your houses with the recitation of the Quran. فَإِنَّ الْبَيْتِ إِذَا كَثُرَ فِيهِ تِلَاوَةُ الْقُرْآنِ. If there is a household in which the recitation of the Quran is increased, كَثُرَ خَيْرُهُ. Important. The khair, the barakah, the righteousness, the virtue in that particular place, in that location increases. It manifests much more. وَأُمْتِعَ أَهْلُهُ. And the people who reside there will be more happier, will be able to see more barakah. وَأَضَاءَ لِأَهْلِ السَّمَاءِ. That house will illuminate for the inhabitants of the heavens. The malaika will be able to see that house illuminating with light. Yes, therefore the recitation is of the greatest importance. No doubt that moving forward outside the month of Ramadan, because undoubtedly the month of Ramadan we recite the Quran, we place effort on the Quran. But the moment the first of Shawwal happens, the day of Eid, somehow unfortunately the Quran goes back to the shelf. Yes, it is of the greatest importance that we take the month of Ramadan as a springboard to keep the message alive of the Holy Book, and to ensure that at least as the first level we have a habit of the recitation. How? When we leave in the morning to go to work or to go to college or wherever, most of us make sure that we eat something, breakfast, and today there are these small cereals and whatever you have on the go. Yes, our souls need the breakfast, and that is the Quran. When we wake up in the morning, wake up 10 minutes earlier, 15 minutes earlier, 5 minutes earlier. Make a habit that you begin your day with the recitation of the immaculate words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It brings much tawfiq, it brings much light to your next 24 hours. Yes, to begin and to initiate the day with what? With the recitation of the Holy Book is of the greatest of importance. And to ensure that our children indeed are inculcated with the spirit of the recitation of the Quran, that the memorization of the Holy Book, that the recitation correctly with the ahkam of tajweed and tartil. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless the madrasa teachers. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward the parents who work hard to keep and to ensure that the children are reciting the Quran correctly. But it is a responsibility at the community level, responsibility at the family level, to make sure that this is adhered to. In which way we must understand this? We must ensure that the recitation of the Quran and the memorization of the Quran in our communities is something that is beloved by our children. Let's have competitions. Let's increase what? Reward for those who recite it in the correct manner, those who memorize more. Yes, let us have that particular initiatives to keep the Quran alive and importantly relevant for our children, for our youth at all ages. That's the first level as far as recitation. Yet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 121, comes forward, and in the view of some people, when it comes to reading this verse, they believe it's an encouragement to recite the Quran. Yes, يَتْلَوْنَهُ حَقَّ تِلَاوَتِهِ. Allah says there are those who we have bestowed the book for, the Quran, those recite it in the best possible way. Some people come forward and say this is recitation, and an emphasis on you and I to recite the Quran. Yet, and a further examination of the Holy Book as well as the Arabic language reveals a very important, delicate point. Qira'ah is not the same as tilawah. Quran doesn't say here, in this instance, يقرؤون. They say يتلونه حق تلاوته. Tilawa means what? Tilawa means قراءة مع التدبر. It means to recite with reflection and contemplation. Yes. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then goes on to say, أولئك يؤمنون به. Those individuals who recite the Quran in tilawa way, those are the ones who truly believe in it. Because the Mufassirin say you can recite it but not believe. But you cannot have the tilawa of the Quran but not believe. Yes, because that's a different level, isn't it? Therefore, the Quran invites us, no doubt, as we have come across in many occasions, to take another level and to be and considered amongst the group of people whom the Ahl al-Bayt describe as Hamalatul Quran, those who carry the Quran. Now, the Quran says to carry something has two levels. مثل الذين حملوا التوراة ثم لم يحملوها كمثل الحمار يحمل أسفارا. Surah Jum'ah, we recite it every Jum'ah, isn't it? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says a community was given the Torah. Unfortunately, the way they dealt with the Torah is just like how a mule or a donkey the books are placed on it and just goes off, has no idea what's it's carrying. Yes? Has no clue whatsoever. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says this hamil, this carrying has no value, has no meaning, has no benefit. Yet we have a beautiful narration from the holy beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. أشراف أمتي حملة القرآن. The best of my ummah are the ones who carry the Quran. In fact, we have another beautiful narration that says حملة القرآن عرفاء أهل الجنة. Those who carry the Quran are the arifs of the paradise. Allahu Akbar. What is this hamala? How do we understand it? In order to understand it, I'll give you a similitude, a parable. Imagine that tomorrow, next day, you are traveling, you're going somewhere. Now you're preparing your bag, yes? And you're thinking, what should I take? What should I take? You pack your bag, then you weigh it. Now you find that even with the small flexibility that the attendant might give you, your bag is much overweight. So you have to take things out. Now you're wondering, inside you may have some sweets, for example, some chocolates, that's there. Now you're thinking, I'm unable to leave it because perhaps you're not in a position to leave this. So there is what? Two options, yes? Either you risk it, you go there and then they tell you you have to throw it away. Yes, you can't take it with you because your bag is too heavy. What is the second option? You eat it. Yes. When you eat it, next day you go, no one will weigh you. No one will say, what's your weight? Yes, no, it's become something that you've had it, you've enjoyed it. And yes, you are not carrying it with you in a suitcase. There is a possibility it will be rejected because only certain amount is something that can be taken. Now you're wondering why all of a sudden we're talking about travel. Yes? When you and I move to the afterlife, when we go to Alamul Barzakh, we don't take anything with us except our kafan. Yes? Now imagine if the Quran is part of us. Imagine if the Quran is embedded with us. Imagine if the Quran is mixed with our flesh and our blood. When it comes to the qabr, when it comes to alamul barzakh, when we are told you cannot take anything with you except what? The kafan physically. The Quran, we are carriers of the Quran, but carriers of the Quran in our heart. The carriers of the Quran in our heart, meaning it will give us much reward. It will give us much higher stations and position, isn't it? Yes? And that's why when it comes to Hamalatul Quran, are those who go through a very important, meticulous plan in their lives, and they have a himma. The Quran speaks about this himma. What is this himma? Himma means a worry. You know, when we wake up in the morning, what is our worry? What is it that we think about? We think about how am I going to work? How am I going to get this business done? How am I going to achieve this? Yes. How am I going to get this person to agree with me? That is the concern for many people. Yes. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to somehow transcend this to having a worry of what is my relationship with the Quran? How much of it do I understand? Am I of the individuals who carry it with me to the afterlife in my heart? Does it occupy such a crucial position? When I pick it up, am I in a position of happiness and joy? Am I eager to recite it? Am I looking for these morsels of spirituality and inspiration from it? Am I searching? Or no, I'm just an individual who's afraid, who want to keep it on the shelf and take it out for istikhara when somebody passes away, and in the month of Ramadan. Yes, it is time to take the book of the Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's book out from the shelves and place it in the heart. It is time for the human being. And the month of Ramadan is a glorious opportunity. Let's look at a few practical ways, because people say, I've heard this many times, the importance of Quran, but I want some things to help me after Ramadan. Ramadan is a great spirit. After Ramadan, how do I keep the message of the Quran and the importance of the Quran alive in my heart? How do I do this? This is not an exhaustive list, but some suggestions. The first thing is, people say there are not enough tafsirs out there in English, for example. So therefore, in order to be able to understand it and to have this tadabbur, أَفَلَا يَتَدَبَّرُونَ الْقُرْآنَ أَمْ عَلَىٰ قُلُوبٍ أَقْفَالُهَا, Allah says, do they not ponder over the book? Do they not understand the book? People say there is not enough tafsirs out there in English, and therefore I'm struggling to seek the meanings of the Holy Book. How do we respond? First of all, there are some available out there. Yes, definitely there is a need for even more and more translations of the books of commentary by our ulama, and something perhaps that some members of the community can themselves take up in coordination with some of the talaba, some of the students in Hawza, because the translation is not an easy task. It requires some background in important Islamic disciplines and sciences, yes, to support, to encourage. That is one thing that certainly we can do. Secondly, there are sessions of tafsir, there are lectures of tafsir on the internet, so many of them available, of ulama coming forward in English and in Gujarati and in Urdu and in Farsi and in Arabic. There are so many out there that one is able to what? Make a habit to listen to make notes, to be inspired. Thirdly, the Quran, when it comes to inspiration, you and I can pick it up, and as far as our own personal development is concerned, seek to be inspired by it, by the way we understand it. This is very delicate and important. We're not talking about fiqh here, yes? Because fiqh, you cannot pick up the Quran and deduce a ruling from it. That's the problem with some people out there, yes? They are not marjas, but they come forward and say, but this doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense. Surely we should do this. And they confuse people. No, it is for the maraja, it's for the mujtahideen to come from the Quran based on their background, based on the understanding of hadith and logic and all the other sciences, to be able to extrapolate law. But for you and I, the Quran has so many levels that you and I can be inspired by. And indeed, it requires us to press the pause button in our lives. Sometimes we pick up the book and all we want to do is finish. All we want to do is somehow finish and close the book, and that's it. No, we need to press the pause button and think, what does this verse mean? Or at least, how do I understand it? There are so many stories and narratives. One invitation is to think, what would I have done if I was in the position of Yusuf alayhi salam, of Ibrahim, of Dhul Qarnayn, all these wonderful stories in the Quran? What would I have done? And you and I, by ourselves, by reading that particular passage, begin to appreciate how you and I would have acted if we were where? In the similar position. That's number one. Number two, people say, what about translation? Is there a recommended translation? Personally, I recommend the translation of our dear brother in Qom, who is of course from the school of Ahl al-Bayt, Brother Ali Quli Qurai, who has translated the Quran. Perhaps it's the best out there. It is not complete by far. No, but it is the best out there that we have. Yet at the same time, we should not depend on translation, because mu'mineen, translation is not tafsir. Very important. Yes, I remember one issue. Yes, verse 64 in chapter 4, Surah An-Nisa, which is known as the wife beating verse. I remember reading the translation. It says, and beat them. When I objected to this, I said the Quran says, وَضْرِبُوهُنْ. Dharb in Arabic doesn't mean beat. It means strike. Yes? And Rawayat comes forward and says this. Therefore, there are these individuals who translators of the Quran, they are fallible beings. They do make mistakes. Sometimes it's their understanding, or they're trying to find the best word to fit it. So we should not necessarily base the meaning of the verse on the translation, but take it as the first level. Take it as something that gives us at least a starting point in terms of what the verse is about. That's the second thing. The third, people say, how do I deal with the boredom element? Sometimes I feel, we're reciting the Quran, I don't understand it. Therefore, I become lazy. It's not something I can keep up with it. There is an invitation to undertake at whatever age we may be. Online there are courses, offline there are courses. When it comes to the Quran, there are approximately 1,800 words, or perhaps even less, that make up over 86% of the Holy Quran in Arabic. Yes? And there are, alhamdulillah, wonderful projects by the World Federation, by Stanmore Jafaris, by others trying to invite us to reflect on certain words of the Quran, asking pertinent questions. But it's a journey. It's a journey that requires struggle, but it's one that brings much reward, yes? One that brings much satisfaction when you and I unlock the treasures of the Quran. That when we undertake a course such as one that helps us with Quranic Arabic, yes, Quranic Arabic, to be able to learn what these particular words refer to. And I tell you, once you start, you'll begin to feel the sweetness. And no translation, no lecture will give you the satisfaction. You will drown in the sea of ocean of knowledge and wisdom that is in the Holy Quran, especially supported by the only group of people who understand the Quran truly, and that is Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi ajma'in. Indeed, questions therefore are then asked. How do I practically make this happen? Well, let's look at our lifestyle. First of all, in the month of Ramadan and in the nights of Qadr, let's devise a plan. How am I going to make sure that I have a good relationship with the Quran outside? So for example, I have these sticky labels, or for example, sticky notes. I write a verse and I place it there where I look often, yes, to remind me. For example, or there are apps out there, or those designers amongst us can design apps to help reflection, yes, and contemplation on the verses of the Holy Quran, no doubt. Or any initiative to take a project to be able to make the Quran more accessible for people in any shape or form, individually or collectively as a community. For example, we may be traveling in the car with the family, yes. In a week, we designate a verse and see to the family, how do you understand this verse? Have discussions amongst the family to make the Quran part and parcel of what? Of our family's life. Because our holy sixth Imam, Imam Ja'far ibn Muhammad Al-Sadiq, salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi, indeed says, if a young man or woman recites the Quran and understands it when they are young, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make sure that the words of the Almighty in the Holy Book is infused with their flesh and their blood from a young age. This needs to be developed and no doubt nurtured. But ultimately it needs supplication. So when you ask for hajat, when you ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for needs and what we want on the nights of Qadr, on these nights of month of Ramadan, we ask Him subhanahu wa ta'ala at the outset to help us to understand the Quran, to help us to unlock its secrets, to help us to get closer to it, to help us to make it the best companion that you and I can have. And certainly we need institutions, we need organizations, we need projects that indeed develop and bring forth the study of the Holy Quran and make it something that is the passion of you and I, that we take it indeed as seriously as possible and make it an important objective in our lives. And we must make sure that the month of the Quran, this month of Ramadan, is not passed without us making at least some improvement with the relationship with the Holy Book. Final point, and that is the spiritual tip of the day. There are mu'mineen, brothers and sisters who are looking to get married, yes? And often ask, what should we recite? What should we do? There is a verse in the Quran that is highly recommended from the narrations as well as the recommendations of the scholars as far as helping one to get married. As well as if you're married already and you want children, as well as if you have children and you want them to be righteous. As well as, I might add, if you're a grandfather and you want your grandchildren to be righteous. This particular verse is chapter 25, verse number 74. وَالَّذِينَ يَقُولُونَ رَبَّنَا هَبْ لَنَا مِنْ أَزْوَاجِنَا وَذُرِّيَّاتِنَا قُرَّةَ أَعْيُنٍ وَاجْعَلْنَا لِلْمُتَّقِينَ إِمَامًا. Recite this as often as possible. Yes, in the blessed Hajj journeys that we have been honored with, one of the mu'mineen came and asked me, he said, I said, recite this The next year he came to me, he said, I did not leave this verse. I recited it every day, and here's my wife. So it works. And if you believe, inshaAllah ta'ala, it works. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us closer to the Holy Quran and enlighten our hearts with the light of the Quran and the light of the Ahl al-Bayt. Peace and blessings be upon them. Wa akhiru da'wana and alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Wa salli Allahumma ala Muhammad wa alihi al-tahirin.